There is a lie that seems human, but functions like a cage. The idea that you are poor because you do not have. It is one of the most effective explanations ever manufactured because it moves attention away from the place where the real problem is. Machiavelli would have smiled at that, because he did not look at the world through what people declare, but through how they react under pressure. And reaction is always more sincere than the story. Poverty does not begin when something disappears from the outside. It begins when something disappears on the inside. And what disappears first is not resources. Control disappears. Not control over others. Control over your own reaction. The moment your reaction is driven from the outside, you are already in a form of poverty that money does not fix. A man is not poor when he has no money. He is poor when fear decides in his place, when he can no longer afford to wait, when he can no longer afford to lose, when every decision is made with his back pressed against the wall. That is where real lack begins, not in the wallet, in position. And position is what power sees first, because position determines what you accept without needing to be ordered. The world is not built to punish lack. It is built to exploit weakness. And weakness is not measured in accounts, but in behaviors, in how quickly you give in how easily you rush, in how much you negotiate your own value before someone else does. Machiavelli would have called that raw material, not because people are inferior, but because they become predictable when they are pressured, and the predictable is used. Machiavelli understood early that power is not exercised over the deprived, but over the insecure. The world does not exploit emptiness. It exploits reaction to emptiness. It exploits haste. It exploits panic. It exploits the need for immediate stability, because immediate stability is the most expensive thing you buy with your dignity. A man who feels poor will accept almost anything, not because he is stupid, but because he is pressured. Pressure changes logic. Under pressure, man no longer looks for what is correct. He looks for what lets him breathe for one more day. And that is the currency of obedience, not chains, urgency, lack of time, the threat of loss. A pressured man becomes predictable. And for Machiavellian thinking, predictability is the key, not loyalty, not morality, but the ability to anticipate what you will do when loss is suggested to you. If loss frightens you, you will be led by loss even when it does not happen. It is enough that it is possible. It is enough that it is repeated. True poverty is a state of contraction. The mind tightens, the horizon shrinks, risk seems fatal, waiting seems impossible, and when you get here, there is no longer any need to force you. You adjust yourself. Exactly the type of man Machiavelli already considered lost. Not because he lacks resources, but because he no longer has distance. When you have no distance, you react. When you react, you expose yourself. When you expose yourself, you are read. And whoever can read you can lead you. This is social mechanics, not philosophy. Tone, rhythm, haste, justification, they are all signs, and the signs are enough to decide who presses and who yields. Power does not need to strike, only to create the conditions in which you rush, to accept, to say yes before it is asked. This is efficient domination, when man does the work of submission himself. Machiavelli would have called that the perfect conquest because it no longer requires effort, only the maintenance of the state, haste, and fear. That is why the most effective forms of control do not look like oppression. They look like reality, like that's how things are, like you have to be reasonable. Rationalization is the last stage of submission. The moment you begin to explain why you had no choice, you are no longer being forced. You force yourself. And at that point, you no longer have an enemy. You have a habit. A man who does not feel poor can lose money without collapsing. A man who feels poor collapses even when he wins, because every gain comes with the fear of loss. And fear is stronger than reward. Machiavelli would have said it simply: whoever is led by fear leads nothing. Money does not create freedom, it creates variations of pressure. Freedom appears only when fear no longer decides in your place, and fear does not disappear once resources appear. Many times, it only becomes more sophisticated. Today, it is the fear of hunger. Tomorrow, it is the fear of shame. The day after tomorrow, it is the fear of falling out of the role. A man with money fears losing it. A man without money fears being left with nothing. Both can be controlled just as easily. The difference is not the external position, it is the relationship with loss. Whoever cannot tolerate loss is already bound. For Machiavelli, whoever cannot lose cannot negotiate, and whoever cannot negotiate will accept another man's term. True poverty is the inability to say no without panic, the inability to wait without anxiety, the inability to remain silent without feeling that you disappear, the inability to remain still when others agitate themselves. When these things become impossible, man begins to live reactively, and reactive life is the raw material of domination. No one forces you to accept bad conditions. They only make you feel that you have no time, that if you do not say yes now, you lose everything, that if you do not conform, you end up outside. The fear of exclusion is one of the oldest levers because it leaves no traces, only small decisions repeated. A psychologically poor man does not see himself as weak. He sees himself as realistic. He says that it's not the moment, that I have to be pragmatic, that I can't afford it. Machiavelli would have recognized immediately the language of the submissive. I have no choice. That's the world. I have to be reasonable. Each such thought cuts a little more from the inner space, until the man no longer defends anything, he only defends himself. This is the dark part. Real poverty is not something done to you. It is something you enter, step by step, through adaptation, through justification, through fatigue, through small compromises that move your center outside of you. And when the center is no longer in you, you no longer decide. You react. A man with a center is dangerous, even without resources, because he does not react in the standard way. He does not panic. He does not rush to explain. He does not ask permission to exist. And this restraint is hard to control. Machiavelli would have called that functional freedom, the only kind that matters. A man without a center is loud but weak. He talks a lot. He justifies himself. He asks to be understood. He seeks validation, not because he is superficial, but because he needs external confirmation to feel stable. And anything you need can be used against you. In Machiavellian thinking, need is pure vulnerability. Inner poverty creates dependence on people, on systems, on promises, on simple ideas, because simple ideas reduce anxiety, even if they are false. Certainty is the drug of the frightened mind, and the frightened man does not want truth. He wants quiet, and he is willing to pay for it with his freedom. When you begin to see this, real discomfort appears. Not because you are being attacked, but because you realize that many of your choices were not made from power, but from avoidance. You did not choose what you wanted. You chose what let you escape pressure in the short term. This shows in posture, in voice, in the way you enter a room and feel the need to adapt immediately. A man who shrinks before he is pushed is already defeated, not by a tyrant, by the mechanism, by his own need for safety. And here the illusion breaks, because if poverty is not only lack, then it cannot be solved only through accumulation. You can accumulate money and remain small. You can accumulate status and remain fearful. You can accumulate security and remain obedient. That does not sound good, but it explains reality. Never are you poor does not mean you do not suffer when you do not have. It means suffering does not decide who you are unless you allow it. Even when you are poor is not an encouragement, it is a warning that the real loss is not material. It is the loss of control over your reaction. From here on, things deepen, because if poverty is a position, then the position can be changed. But change requires something most do not offer, giving up the comfort of explanations. When fear becomes constant, it stops seeming like fear. It becomes normality. It becomes character. Machiavelli knew that a man accustomed to pressure no longer seeks freedom. He seeks order, and order is preferred by those who want to rule. Because order can be offered, and what can be offered can be withdrawn. A man who lives for a long time under pressure no longer looks for exits, he looks for adaptations. He shrinks his expectations. He adjusts his dreams. He redefines his limits, not because he understood something, but because fatigue demands compromise. And each compromise accepted without struggle strengthens the idea that you have no choice. Here, obedience masked as reason appears. I'm realistic. I don't take unnecessary risks. I know my place. These are not logical conclusions. They are psychological adaptations. They are the way the man explains to himself why he no longer resists. Machiavelli would have considered that elegant capitulation. Submission becomes identity. For Machiavelli, the easiest man to lead is not the weak man, but the man who believes he is lucid, who confuses prudence with capitulation, who tells himself he chose when in fact he accepted. Power chooses under hard conditions. Obedience accepts and calls its acceptance maturity. A man who is poor inside thinks in terms of loss. What do I lose if I refuse? What do I lose if I wait? What do I lose if I stay silent? And whoever thinks only like this will always choose the smallest option, not because he is stupid, but because fear leads his calculation. And when fear leads, logic becomes justification. Certainty becomes a drug. The more internal control drops, the more the need for firm conclusions grows. Machiavelli observed that people prefer a stable lie to a truth that requires courage. That is why certainty is the preferred weapon of domination. No one has to beat you if they can fill you with sentences that close thinking. That's how it is. Everyone does it. It can't be otherwise. A man who lives on rigid certainties no longer seeks truth. He seeks confirmation. And confirmation creates loyalty without force. Exactly the type of mass indispensable to power. The masses do not have to understand. They have to feel that they belong. And belonging makes them defend themselves on their own. Inner poverty is seen most clearly in haste, in the need to respond immediately, in the inability to leave a question open, in discomfort with silence, because silence forces you to feel the lack of control, and lack of control frightens more than lack of money. A man who cannot afford to be silent is already dominated, because whoever speaks to fill space offers information, emotion, weakness. Whoever is silent forces the other side to expose itself. That is why silence is a luxury. And Machiavelli would have said that whoever speaks too much sells his position without noticing. When you live by reaction, any stimulus moves you. News, a promise, a vague threat, a limited opportunity. All are enough to change your direction, not because you lack discernment, but because you lack space. And without space, discernment does not function. The man without space is a man placed in a corridor. Here the reversal occurs. Man begins to believe he is free because he can choose among offered options. He does not see that the options are already filtered, that the frame is already set, that the choices are made in a narrow hallway. Machiavelli would have called that permitted freedom, a freedom that exists only as long as you do not become inconvenient. A truly free man is not the one who chooses quickly. He is the one who can afford not to choose yet, to observe, to let tension exist without resolving it immediately. This capacity is rare, and that is precisely why it is dangerous for any system based on reaction. Because reaction can be anticipated, pause cannot. Psychological poverty makes you confuse movement with progress, activity with value, effort with direction. You exhaust yourself running, but you get nowhere. Because running is not strategy, it is only the discharge of anxiety, and the exhausted man will accept anything that promises an ending, even if it is only another form of submission. A man who is poor inside needs to believe, because doubt would mean instability. And instability is intolerable when you have no center. That is why he clings to explanations, even when they hurt him, because they are familiar. Familiarity is a narcotic. Psychological poverty makes you defend structures that shrink you. Not because they are good, but because they are known. The unknown requires will. The known requires obedience, and obedience is cheaper in the short term. When you see these things, a silent rupture appears. You realize that many of your choices were managed reactions. That many limits were accepted before they were tested. That many fears were cultivated. Machiavelli would have said that the best conquest is the one in which the conquered feels he consented. And then the uncomfortable truth appears. No one can pull you out of this state. There is no external rescue, because this kind of poverty is not a lack that can be filled. It is a position that must be abandoned. But abandoning it means loss, the loss of convenient explanations, the loss of the victim identity, the loss of the safety that's life. Because once you give up excuses, only one thing remains: the crude responsibility for how you react. Here the pressure increases because you can no longer blame lack without lying to yourself. You can no longer invoke circumstances without seeing where you yielded too early. Clarity is not pleasant. It is heavy but stable. And from it is born the only control that cannot be bought: control over reaction. A man who reaches here does not become optimistic. He becomes quiet, slower, more attentive, because he begins to understand that the real fight is not for money, but for inner space, for the right to stand firm under pressure without shrinking. At the end of this road, there is no longer the question, who is keeping me down? Machiavelli would have considered it irrelevant. The real question is, where do I yield before I am constrained? Because man is not brought down only by force. He is brought down when he moves his own center outside of himself to avoid discomfort, and then calls that adaptation. The poverty that matters is self-sustained, through haste, through fear, through the refusal to lose. A man who cannot lose cannot rule even his own life. For Machiavelli, this was the final criterion of power, the capacity to endure consequences without dissolving. Whoever cannot endure consequences will always choose the smallest option and will call it wisdom. Whoever cannot remain still under pressure will be moved by others. Whoever cannot be silent will be read. Whoever cannot lose will be blackmailed. It is not cruelty, it is mechanics. And this mechanics functions even without malice. Exploitation does not require intent, it requires opportunity. And the predictable man offers opportunity every day. A man who is poor inside lives in a continuous negotiation with reality. He does not set limits. He adjusts them. He does not choose. He conforms. He does not decide when to leave. He waits to be pushed. And when he is pushed, he says he had no alternative. This is the perfect form of control. The man believes he chose what in fact he accepted. Choice implies power. Acceptance implies fatigue. And fatigue is the soil of domination. When you have been tired long enough, you no longer seek freedom. You seek a break. You no longer seek direction, you seek quiet. And anything that promises quiet becomes tempting, even if it shrinks you. Machiavelli would have said that the tired man sells his future to stop the pressure of the present. True power is not based on force, it is based on rhythm, on the fact that you move faster than you should, on the fact that you react before you see, on the fact that you explain before there is need, on the fact that you yield before you are explicitly asked. This is perfect domination when there is no longer any need to order you. They only suggest, and your mind, already trained to avoid loss, completes the rest. A man who yields early is ideal. He does not need to be pushed. He adjusts himself. He reduces his demands. He corrects his tone. He apologizes in advance. He becomes easy to integrate, easy to manage, easy to ignore. And then, inside, he calls this shrinking character. This is the dark part, when man comes to identify with his own contraction. Here, the final separation is made, not between rich and poor, but between those who contract under pressure and those who remain unmoved. Those who contract become small even when they win, because every gain becomes something to defend with fear. Those who remain unmoved become hard to move even when they lose, because loss does not change their center. A man who does not contract is dangerous, not because he attacks, but because he does not react in the standard way. He does not panic. He does not justify himself. He does not ask permission. And this opacity shifts the balance of power. Machiavelli would have called that inner sovereignty, not moral, functional, control of one's own reaction as the last bastion. Real poverty is the lack of this control, the lack of a center, the lack of distance. When you are completely emotionally transparent, the world reads you and leads you. When you become opaque, the world slows down, not because it respects you, but because it cannot fully anticipate you. And what cannot be anticipated cannot be led easily. For Machiavelli, controlled unpredictability was an advantage, not a defect. That is what "never are you poor" means, not as a slogan, as a warning. That as long as you do not contract, you are not fully conquered. Even when you are poor means that external lack does not automatically have the right to decide for you, not until you hand it your interior. There is no solution left. Machiavelli did not offer comfortable solutions. What remains is a position, cold, quiet, hard to maintain, but stable. A position from which you no longer react like a deprived man, but like one who knows that power begins exactly where fear no longer dictates. And when fear no longer dictates, even material lack becomes only a context, not an identity. It does not warm you. It does not motivate you. It only makes you harder to move. And that, in the real world, is a form of power very few reach.